Today is what's known as Ascension Sunday, or, because we've moved it from Thursday, the Feast of the Ascension. So that makes it our patronal feast. That makes it our, I think, 131st patronal feast. The Church of the Ascension. It's an interesting name. Named Church, the Church of the Ascension. So we'll start with a contest. You have your pencil. You have to write on the back of your bulletin the answers to these questions. There are 3 questions. First is, how many Episcopal parishes are there in the United States? Just take a wild guess. It's okay. The next one is, name the top 3 most popular names for an Episcopal church. Got your 3? Okay. And the third question is, how many churches are named Ascension in the United States? Okay, so like those, as you see in the newspaper, the answers will be given at the end of the column. So hold tight, and we'll get back to the answers, and we'll give an award to the person who comes the closest to getting all 3 of those things right. But it makes you start thinking about the names of churches. Churches are usually named in our tradition by the bishop. In recent times, the bishop has been a little more democratic, and so asks people what they think a good name would be, and then very often takes that advice. That's what happened at Epiphany in East Providence not too many years ago, when they merged Grace and St. Michael's, and they wanted a new name, so they voted for Epiphany, and the bishop said, okay, you can be Epiphany. So that's the way churches get named. It's kind of random. You can look at the history of names, and you can tell something about the personality of the bishop. What kinds of names they used to like to use. And, that's kind of interesting, but I have found over the course of time that the names that a church bears actually have an effect on the life of the church. That there are some who say that every congregation has an angel, and that angel looks over that congregation for its entire life. And like angels, just like people, are a little quirky. So sometimes the quirks of that angel continue from generation to generation, no matter how. And you can think about that in terms of other parishes that you've seen where things just seem to repeat themselves. And the same types of people seem to be going there. But also, the idea of a patronal feast is the idea of a patron. So churches were named after saints, so that saint would in fact be the patron of that congregation, and would pray for the congregation, and sometimes in some places the congregation would pray particularly to that saint and ask for the guidance. And so churches would have an identity with that particular saint or that particular name. And I think that's actually true. I was once in a church named St. James Church. St. James is a great saint, He was a fisherman, and he was sort of a down-to-earth guy. and he was not a theologian, and he didn't really get it for most of his relationship with Jesus, but he hung in there for the whole time. And this congregation, in fact, was a bunch of people who, they weren't fishermen, but they were comparable to fishermen. There were a lot of manual laborers there, a lot of sort of regular folks who were unpretentious and hardworking and faithful. So you could talk about St. James, and people could identify with St. James. And that was really lovely. Or another church was St. Francis. Now, St. Francis, you all know about St. Francis, and all about the birds and creation and all that sort of thing. Well, this congregation, which happened to be situated in a very lovely little area around some woods, lived into that role of St. Francis, into the idea of simplicity and ecology and creationism, and it really did shape who they were. There was another church I was at, which was named after St. Martin. And St. Martin, you remember the most famous story, you may not, but you did if you went to this parish. The most famous story about St. Martin is that he was a soldier and coming back from a battle, and he rode through the city gate. And there was a beggar at the side of the road. And he cut his cloak in half and gave half of his cloak to this beggar. And that was his conversion experience, because then he realized that the beggar was Christ. And then he became a bishop and did lots of other things. But the story, the central story about him, is about cutting his cloak in half. Well, it always made me laugh, because this was a congregation of very lovely people. And they would, in fact, like this story and about giving away half your cloak. But they would never give away the whole cloak. They would hold on to part of the cloak. This isn't St. Francis we're talking about, where they might be impelled to live lives of poverty. They would just be impelled to give away half a cloak. And that was definitely who they were. So that was an appropriate saint for that church.